Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. Today we are revisiting one of my favorite topics, and that is batching. But today we're looking at it from a different angle of some things that I've reevaluated that I might be better off not batching. So let's just go ahead and dive in. This is, as I'm recording this, I'm early into September, kind of revisiting different routines and habits. My kids started a new school. I'm going to get more into that in some future episodes. They have started a school that's Waldorf inspired, a lot of like Rudolf Steiner type philosophies, and they talk a lot about rhythms and routines. And I've been doing some reading and research into that. So a lot more to come probably in the upcoming weeks and months on different rhythms. But before I get into that, I decided to change up something that I was batching, and that is my weightlifting. So I'll try and link the episode, but I talked a year or two ago about strength training. I have started doing, heavy lifting, feel very strongly that it is, so important, especially as we age, to continue to do heavy lifting for bone health and muscle health, just overall health. And in incorporating that, when I started out, so I'm doing a program where I have online coaching. So we have a gym here. My husband installed it years ago and has always been doing it. And then, it took me a few years, but I finally caught on and started doing it as well. And with the program I use, I have a coach who sends me a workout, my workouts for the week. There's a little like online calendar. And then I record videos of me doing my lifts. And then she gives a little video back, giving feedback. And, it's worked out really smoothly. But the workouts themselves, so it's really the major lifts of doing, squat, bench, press, and deadlift. And in the past, it was, I was doing 3 of those 4 lifts every session. And, I think ideally they would love to see you doing 3 to 4 sessions a week. I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I can commit to 2 sessions a week, sometimes 3, but really 2 was like what I could commit to. But as you can imagine, like doing all 3 of those lifts, and then, you take little breaks in between the lifts. So, it was a good hour and a half, but really ended up being almost 2 hours, twice a week. And in the beginning, I really liked that. I liked having kind of 2 days where I set aside to really commit to doing that. But I found over time, this summer, it just started to get to be where it felt like a lot. And I think part of it was, maybe not even part of it, maybe all of it was just kind of mentally, I would have a block of like not quite wanting to do it. And I think it's because, one, we were getting to the point where we're adding on more and more weights. You're always increasing the amount of weight that you're doing. So, as I added on more weights and they were kind of these longer sessions, I started to just not really look forward to it in the way that I had in the beginning. And I used this. So it was great. I kind of had a few weeks of struggle, but finally I reached out to my coach and was very honest about it. And we had a nice call and talked through different ways that we could approach it. And I love that she, one, was able to, sit down with me and say, hey, there's other ways we can approach this in terms of how you're doing it. Because I said, look, I'm afraid that if we continue to go the way we're going, eventually I'm going to almost burn out, right? Like I'm just not going to want to do it anymore. And I want to make sure that it's something that I continue to be motivated to do, even though I have this kind of motivation in terms of I see logically the reason for doing it, but I also want to make sure that as I'm doing it, it's something that I'm not doing because I have to, but because I have the opportunity, and this is similar to a lot of other things that we talk about. And, of course, I'm going to bring in meal prep, but, that's something that we talk about with meal prep and meal planning is like not looking at meals as this something that you have to do, but it should get to be like, oh, this cool opportunity or this like fun, part of your week, and really figuring out how to shift that. And so what I figured out with my coach is instead of doing these 2 to 3 like really big lifting days, I would just do 1 lift a day. And that way it'd be a lot quicker, and I could kind of get it out early in the morning and then start my day and be done for the day. And so that's what we shifted to, is instead of doing these 2 longer sessions is we broke it down, and now I'm doing 4 days a week instead of two, and I'm just doing one lift a day. And that way it's just really quick and easy. There's nothing, I'm not wanting to put it off. I always do it first thing in the morning. So I'm just getting it out of the way. And it's really worked out well. And again, I think it's probably not just partly, but mostly just this mental shift of it's a lot easier for me to wrap my head around, okay, this morning I can do squats, but then once I do my squats, I'm done. So, there's not like a lot to get through. It's easy. It's fun. I look forward to it again. And as I was doing this, I'm thinking through like, are there other things in my life? Because, we talk a lot on here about batching and the benefits of batching. But I think you also have to take into account the downsides to batching. And one of those being like, is this by batching it, am I making it this thing that then I'm putting off? And if so, then maybe it's time to revisit and like, not over batch. So just kind of looking at areas in your life, I've challenged you in the past, like, are there areas where you can batch things? But now I would say, are there things that you're batching and because of that, you're putting them off or dreading them? And if you're starting to get that feeling, then maybe there's a point where you want to, kind of take a step back and ease up on the batching. And this is just going to shift over time, right? Like what works best with your rhythm now is going to be different in future years. So I think it's important to just always kind of revisit this. Like I could see getting back to doing the longer sessions at some point if that aligns better with my schedule. But for right now, doing these like shorter bursts, first thing in the morning, getting them out of the way, just it works really well. It feels really good. But again, doesn't mean that can't shift again in the future, because in the past, I really liked only doing it 2 days a week. I liked that it wasn't every day. So, that can always change over time. As I was thinking through this episode, I'm like, okay, so what things am I still batching? And, one of those, laundry, I'm still batching laundry. To me, it makes more sense to do it less often and more all at once. It's so much more efficient with my time. The number one thing that I batch, and I don't know that this would ever change, and that is errands. We live in the country. Driving into town to do errands is just, it's a big ordeal. So I always make sure, to kind of keep a running list of any errands that need to be run. One, so that I can batch them, but two, also can I delegate them? Someone else in the household running into town, can someone else, drop off the library books or whatever it may be. But I'm always trying to make sure, whether it's grocery pickup or any of that, that I'm having like a designated day into town for doing the errands. So that's something that really, really makes sense to batch, especially with our location. Work tasks, a lot of my work tasks, I am batching, podcast episodes. I'm sitting down right now in front of the microphone. I'm going to do multiple episodes at once. I don't just get on every week and scramble to do a new episode. I'm sitting down and doing multiple episodes in one sitting. And the same is true for a lot of different work tasks. I find it easier to sit down and kind of focus on one thing at a time versus just a lot of little things scattered throughout the day and the week. But I did think of another example where, batching versus not. So when it comes to work tasks on Instagram, we've always batched our, posts, like the static posts that you see. And one thing that we don't batch, though, are our reels. So if you follow along there, you might have noticed that I've been playing around with doing different reels. If you're listening and seeing those, I would love any feedback or ideas or thoughts you have on that. It's been kind of a fun experiment. And I found that it's actually easier not to batch, and kind of for a few reasons. Well, the first one being, I feel like Instagram makes it really hard for me to batch them. Like I've tried in the past to like save the videos and then post them again. And it's like, there's always these little glitches that you run into. And I think Instagram really wants you to like be on in the moment and do that. And, but I've also found it kind of just comes across more, I feel like reels are a little more similar to stories than the static post, and that they do help when they're kind of in real time and have that like real time energy to them. So that's something that we have been doing more real time. Whereas the post, we still are doing, a month at a time and batching those. So just lots of little places where I can see that, sometimes batching makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. And then of course, the one that I always come back to is meal prep. I am certainly meal prepping and batching that at times, but as I've mentioned in the past, there are seasons where I don't do as much of that. And if you are a Prep Dish subscriber, you know that our meal plans are there to help you, learn how to batch and meal prep, but they're also super helpful and just as appropriate to use if you decide not to batch for a season. You can still use all of the grocery list, and the instructions can be used just as well if you're not doing that batching. I do have to put in the plug and the reminder that if you haven't tried the meal plans, you can go to prepdish.com/podcast and try a week for free, see what it's like to batch your meal prep. The other way to get your hands on that one free week is to text the number 33777 and use the word meal prep, all one word, and you'll get you'll get that 1 week free. So you're going to text that word meal prep, all one word, and the phone number that you put in is 33777. And then that'll also get you signed up for our newsletter, which, we post a lot of different recipes and ideas on batching and a lot of similar content to what you hear here on the podcast. So those are my thoughts today on batching. If you are on Instagram or in our Facebook group, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I always enjoy hearing feedback. What are you batching? Are there things where you feel like you need to add in more batching, or are there maybe areas like my weightlifting example where you might be over batching and it's time to scale back and revisit what's working for you? So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I will be back again next Monday with a next episode.